Welcome to the Wall Street Shuffle. I'm Dan Kofal. Danny Stewart is my co-host, sitting right here as always. All right, hey, joining us today, we've got a terrific pair of guests, and we want to get to them right away because they're on a very, very short time schedule. We have retired Marine Major General Larry Taylor with us and retired Air Force General Paul Hester with us. Both gentlemen are with a group called JINSA. And gentlemen, I'm going to let you describe what JINSA is. And we're really going to be talking today about national security and our budget and how we can maintain our priorities and still cut our budgets, which is for people like us in this room and 5 or 10 people listening to us in the studio. These are big problems for us because an across-the-board cut in budgets doesn't keep us safe and doesn't keep our family safe. And I want to get right into that. So who wants to be first to talk a little bit about JINSA?
Well, Dan, thanks so much for inviting us on to be with you on the show. We appreciate that.
You're good. Don't worry about it. You've got the one hot microphone that you can be back 15 feet and talk, and it'll get you.
Yeah, of course. I'm remembering, I'll tell the studio audience, the audience out there in Radio Land, that you told me just before we came on to make sure that I had this microphone right in my lips, only to have the technician come in a moment ago as I was kissing this microphone, and he jerked it away from my face and put it about 2 feet away and said, "You're good right there, General. Don't touch it anymore."
Yeah, but you're Air Force. He was a ground pounder. That's the difference, General.
Maybe there is a difference. I was in comfort in my airplane with my air conditioning on.
That's exactly right.
He was enduring the heat, as you talked about a bit.
All right, well, let's talk about what does JINSA stand for?
Well, JINSA stands for Jewish Institute National Security Affairs.
Right.
And it is an organization that is dedicated here in the United States,
right.
An American organization dedicated to national security affairs, which tries to educate the public
right.
on American national security affairs. They have a close association, as you might expect, with Israel. And we visit Israel at least once a year in a formal way and do a lot of work with others who are interested in national security affairs. And we try to educate a body of people and then let that kind of ripple out across the United States in forums, radio programs, that tells people interesting factoids, if you will, about what happens in Washington, D.C. is important to you as an individual and your family, and why America does need to have a Defense Department and what it does for us, other than fighting those wars that we see on the front page of the paper every day.
And I'm sure one of the difficult things you guys have to deal with too is first of all, the name JINSA would imply that it's almost a Jewish lobbying group, which it is not that at all. Over half the members are not Jewish. It is not just worrying about the defense of Israel or the defense of the United States. It's Middle East. It's United States. It has an unusual name, but it is not exclusively it's not. Israel is not the sole focus of this organization by any stretch.
That's exactly right, and as a way of illustrating that, I could point out that with JINSA, I've been to Taiwan twice, Turkey, Bosnia, Bulgaria. JINSA has regular trips to India to deal with security affairs there. Also, Ukraine, Republic of Georgia, all over the world. Really,
they only take you to the finest places.
Exactly.
I didn't hear one place in there that was a vacation spot.
Some of those places are very nice, actually. But the importance of JINSA is illustrated when you go to places like this, and you always meet with the highest level folks. You meet with the Prime Minister. You meet with the Minister of Defense. You meet with the President. You meet with everybody that has a significant way of impacting our interests, the American interests in that part of the world.
Yeah, you have access. You'd have access ordinarily just because of who you gentlemen are, but this is just a little bit more focused access. And you're obviously seeing on a first-hand basis the national security needs of the United States. Let's just jump right in. So I want to keep a close eye on that clock because I know you guys are on a very tight schedule. And I want to thank you very much for both being here and for JINSA bringing you by today. Very, very generous of your time. Let's talk about national security objectives and the budget. To hear the Democrats talk, I know you gentlemen don't want to be political. I'll be the political side. They believe that cuts are cuts, and probably let's go for defense first. Let's get some Social Security in there. Let's get the stuff that's going to hurt the country the most out of the way. I'm a constitutionalist. I don't believe that's right. I think you have to pick and choose where you cut, and I don't think you pick and choose to cut defense spending in an environment like this. Maybe make it more efficient. How do you gentlemen, how would you respond to somebody saying the defense budget is overbloated, $700 billion, absolutely absurd, cut the hell out of it?
Well, this is a very, very long conversation, which we can't have today in the depth that you'd like to do so. Probably over several days, you would get a chance to just scratch the surface. 700 billion probably is a too large a number, but you remember that 700 billion, along with some supplemental funding, is to pay for 2 wars that we've got, and now we've got almost a third one in Libya. So can that $700 billion come down? Certainly in the ivory tower of looking at it, it can. But the objective of the military in the United States, of course, is to provide for the defense of the United States and its citizens. So before you get to that part, you have to go back and ask, beyond defending our borders, how much more do you want the military to do in terms of provide for the defense? And how long does that string run across the world? Once you go and solve that problem and decide how you want to, in fact, fight those wars, Secretary Gates, who just left the position as the Secretary of Defense, suggested recently before he left that we might need to look at not being able to fight 2 wars at once. And we've had a variety of looks at that problem for a number of years now, whether you fight 2 at once, whether you fight, hold, and fight. But he suggested that to save money, we would in fact position and prioritize our forces and the size of our forces to only fight in one location. Those are issues that our Congress, those are issues that our think tanks, those are issues that the president must be engaged in a national debate on both sides of the aisle, Republican, Democrat, Independent, and that will then lead you to how big the Defense Department budget should be.
General Hester, let me ask you this. Why wouldn't we want to fight let's say a different strategy? What has always confounded me is when we want to combine the powers of the military, which are really to break things and kill people. I mean, to a great extent, and that's what they're designed for. Instead of breaking things and then nation building and then leaving, and the cost of the nation building side is so high, we're fighting wars entirely differently than we fought them 15, 60 years ago. We're fighting them almost like it's like we're refighting Vietnam every day. I remember Vietnam. It's like we're fighting to hold our ground to make a point. We're not fighting to win because we're not clearly defining what's winning. I have a problem. I'll ask General Taylor, if I could ask you, how do we define what's winning in Iraq? How do we define what's Libya? Tell me what's a win in Libya, for goodness sakes.
Well, excellent question, of course, Dan. And I think the way you begin that discussion is by deciding just what it is are the vital interests of the United States of America. Then you work from there to deciding what specific policy we should have in any particular part of the world. I'm not prepared to say that, for example, the involvement in Libya was a bad idea necessarily, but does it meet that appropriate framework of U.S. vital interests? I'm not so sure.
But General, if you're trying to do it within a budget, I mean, and here's the funny thing: we used to fight wars when we needed to. We used to fight wars with unlimited budgets because the objective was to win. There was no worry about that. Just win. Now we're saying, all right, how much can Iraq really cost me? Well, it's got to cost me $1 trillion. It's got to cost me. We're defining how much the war is going to cost before we fight. It's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And adding 3 fronts in the Middle East is, and you could add 4 or 5 more. You could have 2 or 3 more if you wanted them in about a day. And there's absolutely no objective there except to make a point, hold ground, change leadership. It means nothing.
The silver lining of this debt problem and the budget issue is that it is, maybe for the first time in the minds of many of our citizens, forcing them to decide just what is it that they want their government to do and what is it that governments were fundamentally created for, not only this government, but every government. And, of course, the first reason is internal and external security. There are a lot of other good things that can be done with public money, but only if you have it. If your funds are limited, then you've got to go back to first principles. You've got to go back to America's vital interests.
So what do we do in an environment where every dollar we spend on the military, right now we're borrowing it from China or some Saudi Arabia or from wherever else? We are fighting wars on somebody else's dollar as long as they will allow us to do that, unless we just continue to print money. How in the world where are our national priorities? And I'll throw into that question, what about our Mexican border? I mean, what about things that are a real threat to American citizens right this very minute? What does JINSA have to say about what our national priorities maybe where our priorities should lie. And there was silence on that.
Well, I don't know that there's silence on that any more than you've asked a hell of a question that is taking up a lot of time with people in Washington, D.C.
Yep.
Because the priorities of not only as I watched MSNBC last night and saw Rachel Maddow walking in front of a group of wind turbines, and the conversation as she walked in front of them was her own voice saying, we need to attack now the issue of long-term sustainable energy in this country, and needs a focus like any focus we've had before, similar to going to the moon. How could anybody disagree with that? Because we know that it's energy that, in fact, that fuels the economy. So you have to throw energy into that piece of that. Welfare of your citizens, immigration, which has been talked about enormously in Washington with no solutions to that problem. There's a clear divide between the parties in there. And then that's only talking about here as opposed to looking at things beyond our borders and what we need to do. So I don't have an answer for you in a litany of first to last.
Well, how about political triage? I mean, everything is great. Even Rachel Maddow, as much of a nutcase as she is, saying, okay, we've got to go out there and we've got to have green energy and we've got to have all this stuff. Yeah, that's great. We've got to have national health care. Yeah, that's great if we have the money, but we don't. So now we're doing financial triage. We've got X dollars to spend, and we've got X many or Y many number of national defense priorities. What's number one? At least tell me what's the first national defense priority. Is it Russia? Is it China? According to the folks I talk to in the military, it's China. That's the folks I talk to right now. So, and our southern border. Those are the two in order.
Well, rather than identifying a particular potential threat, I think the number one vital interest of the United States is strategic defense of the homeland and its citizens. And then you derive from that, okay, what are the threats to that particular vital interest? And then you move from that on to what are our vital interests in other parts of the world. Perhaps the Western Pacific is one which could potentially cause big problems.
I just throw that out, General, because I had the pleasure of getting a ride on a boomer about a year ago and talking to the captain, talking to everybody on that ship. Nothing was more majestical than getting a ride on a boomer. That was amazing. And I talked to the captain. I said, what do you wake up? What's the first thing you're the most concerned of when you wake up? He said, China. And so did everybody on that ship. I found that to be interesting because I didn't expect that answer. So
well, it is interesting to note that the Chinese are building and operating nuclear submarines. There's only one reason to have a nuclear submarine as opposed to a conventional submarine, and that's if you intend to send it a long way from home and for a very long time.
Thank you for saying that.
Where are they planning? So where are they planning on sending them, and why?
I'm guessing not Russia. Just taking a shot at that. I'm just all right. So let's go back to our priorities now. I think one of our priorities clearly is Israel in the Middle East, not just because you're representing JINSA here today, but that is our ally in the Middle East. That's a country that's capable of doing some magical things should they need to, but they're not wizards. They are not infinitely capable, and at some point in time, they're going to reach their limit of ability to survive. If Israel fails, the U.S. will fail. That's my prediction, because I think it's so key to the Middle East. I think it is so key to the U.S., the persona of the U.S. and the plans for the U.S. I think if we allow Israel to fail, then any other ally we've got out there is going to say, who the hell are these people in America? They're not our allies. They're not our friends. They're a convenient friend when it's convenient. And I think that's my greatest concern. What do you all think about America in defense of Israel?
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head. And
I've been working all week for these interviews. I want you to know this.
Well, I understand that. And what I liked about the way you said is not necessarily the issue about Israel, because you could point that similar conversation to a number of treaties and alliances that we have around the world. And it's all about whether America stands up to the paper that it signs and gets ratified through our Congress. And that's the whole issue about sending messages and how strongly we support and how strongly we criticize each other inside of an alliance for what both a country that we are partners with and they criticize us, all behind closed doors, we would hope, instead of out in the public forum. But nonetheless, it sends a powerful message if we were to walk away from any of those alliances and we allow any of them to fail.
You bet. And General, same thing?
I think that Israel is the canary in the coal mine of Western civilization.
Well, that was a little bit more direct than even I went. Thank you. I appreciate that. So do we Taiwan, to me, is different than Israel. And it's critical, but it's not Israel.
I think there are great similarities between the problems that the Taiwanese face and the problems that the Israelis face. And frankly, I'm surprised that the Israelis and the Taiwanese haven't worked more closely together because of their similar interests.
If you had a message to get out to our listeners, what about JINSA? Now, anybody can join JINSA, correct? Anyway. And really there isn't a defined, even a membership fee for it. Some organizations like Danny and I belong to, very expensive organizations. JINSA is not one of those. JINSA is trying to build an information base and educate people. And you can, if I'm not correct, join for nothing. Is that possible? $2, $25, $2,500, $25,000. Somebody had
$25.
$25. Okay.
And it would be wonderful if it were $25,000.
But $25 is it. And they can go to jinsa.org. They can go to jinsa.org and learn more about it and join. And what are they? You gentlemen are here to educate folks in Dallas tonight. What roles do you play in JINSA? What more do you do? Are you PR work, or do you do more for JINSA than this?
Well, JINSA has a board of advisors, which is made up of a couple of dozen retired generals and admirals, all of which have made trips around the world with JINSA, and of course they have the vast experience of having served in the military. And there's a whole range of issues that we advise JINSA on and assist in spreading the word about JINSA to all over the country.
Anytime I can talk about national security events and national security affairs, I take the opportunity, whether it's going to my alma mater, Ole Miss, and commissioning all the lieutenants in the Army and the Air Force, as I did in May, or whether it is to go back to my hometown for the 4th of July and give a 4th of July speech. Because the young men and women who we, on their backs, do we have the security of our nation, to talk about them and what they do for us is important to highlight that every day. Not just the platitudes of seeing wounded warriors coming back, or to the platitudes of seeing a unit that comes back, but every one of them performs a great service to our nation because they have stood up and volunteered. One way is through JINSA. One way is through gentlemen like you making your way around the country and helping to inform folks. I wish we could invite our whole audience out to see you guys tonight. They would enjoy that very much, but they can go on to jinsa.org and read more about you. And I want to thank you both very much, Major General Larry Taylor and General Paul Hester, one Air Force, one Marine. We appreciate it very much, and I'm sorry that our producer's a ground pounder. He would have given you a much more warm welcome. Well, we're grateful for your invitation to be on the show with you and Danny, and appreciate the opportunity. We'd love to have you gentlemen back anytime. Godspeed and God bless tonight. Folks, we're going to be right back after this.